Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today, we're talking about Fallout, the adaptation of the popular video game series that is currently streaming on Amazon Prime. It's 8 episodes of post-apocalyptic insanity, and I really enjoyed it. I've got a panel of guests today. First, returning to the show is Regina Graves, set decorator. Great to have you back, Regina.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here, and I'm glad you invited our next guest as well, prop master Michael Jortner. Michael, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we're also fortunate to have prop master Peter Gelfman. Peter, welcome.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here.
Finally, joining me in the co-host chair once again is Gianni DeMaia, host of the Bad Movies podcast, friend of the show, and most importantly, avid player of the Fallout video game. Gianni, nice to see you again.
Yeah, very good to be here. Pulled myself away from playing Fallout to be here. So.
All right. Well, warning for listeners, today's conversation will contain spoilers, definitely for the series, perhaps for the game as well. I don't know, not being a game player myself. Where I want to start, though, is normally I would say it's unusual to have two prop masters on a show, and that's where we would talk about. But the three of you have done this a couple of times. Talk to me about your history working together and how that led to you guys being involved with Fallout.
First, I should say I've known Peter and Regina for a long time before we started this dual partnership role, but we started it on a show called The Nick, which I think that was about 2015?
14?
Fantastic show.
Yes. But we started that because I was finishing up something and Peter started to prep The Nick for me. I had been called to do the job by a prop master in Los Angeles who ended up not being able to do the job. So I was going to co-prop master with him as the New York prop master. He ended up having to leave the job before it started. So I had Peter start for me, and then I was going to come on and do it. And then as the prep sort of started unfolding, it turned out that it seemed like the need for two prop masters existed. We both worked well together, and the producers had already budgeted for that in the initial planning of the show, and they just asked us to both stay on, and we did.
That was sort of a function of Steven Soderbergh's work method. I mean, he wanted to use his usual prop master, who's an LA-based prop master. And if you do that in New York, the union rules sort of dictate that you should have man that position with a New York prop master. So Michael was going to do that, but he was busy, so I started for him. And then the LA prop master backed out, and the producer said, "Hey, I'm budgeted for both of you guys, so why don't you both work? We like both of you, and maybe this will make things a little easier." And in the event, it certainly did.
And Regina, you were working on that show, so you're another point of view that, yes, this worked with these two guys.
It did work. And I think what they're failed to mention is that not only did they take care of all the props and all the specialty things, but they took care of the horses and wrangled all that and, the wagons. So that was a huge job in itself. So they were creating all these great things for the hospital sets and also taking care of all the horses on a day-to-day basis. So it was a really big job, and they work really well together. So.
And the ambulances.
And the ambulance. Everything. So.
Well, so bring me from the Nick to Fallout. There's been shows you guys have done together since then. Give me an idea of how Fallout came about, that, again, all three of you were working on it.
At the time, we were doing The Gilded Age, which was another period show that had horses and carriages. And there was a show that was coming to New York that we knew the production designer for, that was the show that never got made, which turned into Fallout. And when that happened, we were talking about doing that show, and I was talking to the producer, and I explained to them that this show seemed like, just with what they were talking about, it would be great to have another prop master on who can prep while we're filming, and it was going to be in multiple countries. And as a result, it's sort of, that conversation started again, and Peter was going to be able to start a little, like he was starting after me, and we started prepping the show. And as soon as Peter started prepping, the show sort of stopped existing.
Probably because of my participation.
But at the same time, they brought out the pilot to Fallout. And at the time, we thought it was going to be one episode, but we were already both on, and the show sort of also had a lot going on. We went downstairs to talk to the producers, and we set up the idea that we would both be on the show doing that.
Should mention that Howard Cummings, who was the
Yeah.
production designer on the Nick, was also the production designer on Ancillary Justice, and then which then fell apart and then turned into Fallout. But they were both Jonah Nolan shows, Ancillary Justice and Fallout.
You guys are referencing Jonah. We're talking about Jonathan Nolan,
Yes.
the director, producer. He and his partner Lisa Joy, Westworld, and all that. But so if I see him at a party, I'd call him Jonah. That's his preferred name. Is that what
he goes by Jonah Nolan? And basically, he just decided when Ancillary fell apart that he had already booked the stages and so on, so we might as well just bring another project that he owned in. And it was almost like sort of a second thought, you know. Oh, well, if we can't do Ancillary, we'll just do Fallout instead in New York, seeing as we have giant stages booked and so on. We didn't really, I didn't really believe it would work out that well at the time, but
But we were already there, and it seemed like we were going to stick around, so we just did.
yeah,
Yeah, and then what was supposed to be just a pilot ended up being, then it was supposed to be just 3 episodes, then it turned into the whole show.
Wow. So they saw the early work that you were doing and then committed to the entire 8-episode season.
I don't know if it worked like that.
I mean, I think that they decided to do more than one because it was so to get everything ready for one episode would have been very expensive to just shoot one thing once they built all the sets, because there was so much that needed to be created just to shoot the first episode. So they initially had said 2 episodes, and then as we were prepping, I guess we started really in January prepping that. By the beginning of February, it seemed like there was going to be more of it. I kind of remember, but we didn't really know how much. But then a couple of weeks later, it was 8 episodes. So we really hadn't. I guess we were on it for like a month and a half before it became a full-fledged show.
We're going to dive deeper into some of the specific sets and what all of you brought to, but let's take a step back. How much of the video game did the 3 of you know coming in, and what did you have to learn to kind of prepare for the challenges of this show?
Speaking for myself, I think I might have heard of it before. I had certainly never played it. Not being a big gamer, unfortunately in the New York film business, I don't have a ton of free time, and I'm a family man. Michael is too, Regina is also, and just not a lot of game time. But once we started, we familiarized ourselves with it pretty quickly, and I played a few hours of it. I think, Michael, you played a few hours of it too. I don't know if Regina, if you ever managed to get into the gameplay at all, but I was playing Fallout 3, I think. Maybe it was 4, or maybe a little bit of both.
I'm not a big gamer, so I had my son basically walk me through the game. I have no idea how to do a controller and what have you, but he brought me through the vaults and everything to see what it all looked like. And we had so much research also that we worked with, but I had never heard of the game. I'd never even heard of Fallout.
When we first heard that the show was going to potentially be happening, we ordered a bunch of these art books of Fallout that were available, and a bunch of other sort of reference books that were about the different aspects of the gameplay that we were just looking at, and then we just started to play the game. And I think in January it helped because it was still, COVID was still very much a thing in the film world in terms of working remotely, and we started actually the first maybe 3 or 4 weeks of prep from working from home with a lot of Zoom meetings. So in between the Zoom meetings, there was some time to actually play the game a little bit.
You guys had obviously mentioned that you came from a lot of historical based shows. Was it a sort of similar transition? Because obviously Fallout is a totally different science fiction, very retro 50s, Weird West kind of vibe, but it still has like a very big basis in the sort of research of the lore and the different intricacies that go into the sort of past circumstances that create a lot of the props and set pieces that you guys did now. Did you feel like it was a natural sort of transition in doing the historical research for something like the Nick and then doing historical research in a totally different way for something like Fallout?
I would say so. It's
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically the process that we go through on any movie, whether it's historical, whether it's futuristic, or whether it's contemporary. There's a couple of months of research that you have to do into even if it's contemporary, into the script, into what the details of the script are. But coming from historical, which we had done right before that, we all three of us worked on the Gilded Age, which was just a total deep dive into the 1880s and New York's history from then, to immerse yourself into a different universe was almost natural, I would say. I don't know if you guys agree.
Speaking from a prop standpoint, I feel like when you're doing a show, any sort of historical show where you sort of have to build your own kind of prop house that you can have of items that you may not, that have not come up, but will potentially come up throughout the show. That way you can sort of adapt anything you have into something else. I think, and especially in Fallout, we just started knowing that the show had this sort of retro futuristic aesthetic to it. We did do a lot of shopping, just buying a lot of objects, devices, appliances, you have it, just things that would work within the show as aesthetic, but also would be able to be turned into something else.
Yeah, we bought a lot of like vintage, like radio equipment, scientific apparatus, and then we did definitely took a lot of that stuff apart and built it into other props that we were building.
But even just like we built a lot of like backpacks for wastelanders in the town, we built a lot of weapons, we built a lot of carts and things like that. And all of that sort of was easy, was helpful to have on our shelves of items to look at and get some inspiration from, and then be able to pull from to sort of create the world,
Yeah, for example, like when we were doing Philly, we had bought a bunch of 50s mannequin heads for use as dog attack training dummies for the Wilsig lab scene, and it didn't work out that we needed them for that. I think maybe we molded one of them and used that for the dummies, but we then never used the dummies. So we used the heads like on poles as part of the vending cart in Philly that we were sort of around during the big battle scene in Philly. Like that's the kind of adaptation of stuff that we used to have to do with our giant heaps of stuff that we had in the shop all the time.
We're going to talk about some of these locations. I want to start specifically with the vaults, which, again, not being familiar with the gameplay, at least from the show perspective, that's sort of our introduction into this world that's in the future. Now, if you're not familiar with the show, number one, go watch the show. But two, we start in a future, somebody tell me the year 2077. Am I getting that right?
I think
That's a sort of a retro 50s style future. The apocalypse happens. We jump ahead 200 years. And these vaults are a key aspect of that. Regina, my question for you is how you approach this.
Well, the way we approach the vaults is that we want it to be correct to the game. We want the gamers to be happy. And all the vaults have a certain look, and they all contain, some sort of little key throughout the whole game. We ended up going with the blue and yellow, like the blue and yellow jumpsuits, and everything, because it's like post-apocalyptic, had this like 50s retro vibe to it. The fun part for us was that, not only getting like this 50s furniture, but the wallpapers in the little vaults were really over exaggerated. So the patterns were really big. So that was really fun. So we would take wallpaper, and our graphic artists would then blow it up, and we would, have our way with it. The same, with like the fabrics and stuff like that. It was all kind of futuristic in the sense where, like the retro refrigerators and the stoves we had spray painted by a car painter. And I don't know, I think we were just trying to be true to the game.
Yeah, all the brand names on a lot of the appliances were like lifted directly out of the game. Like what was the stove was called? The like Radiation Queen or something.
The dishwasher was the queen. The
was the Atomic Queen?
Atomic Queen.
mean-
which all came right from the game. And we did a lot of that in the propping too. We had
we made all the products that were sort of, pre-war products in the game, like the Blamco mac and cheese and the sugar bombs and all the deviled eggs and everything else. But one thing is, for us, I know Peter and I had spent a lot of time, like, because we were making a lot of supplies and a lot of like food storage and a lot of equipment for the vault, and we sort of felt like there were certain things that would be realistic to exist in the vault and other things that would not be as realistic to be packaged to be stored for hundreds of years. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, or just what would be funny and work with the style of the game, but also wouldn't be like a ridiculous thing to have in the vault.
it's all sort of a riff on canned food from the fallout shelters in the 50s, and the fact that supposedly Hostess Twinkies last on the shelf for 200 years. So we had a lot of junk food like that was very sugary looking, that we thought would be fancy lad cakes and stuff that had lasted for 300 years by the time anybody's eating them.
Unbeknownst to us, Jello ended up becoming a major sort of thing that we kept on being asked to make different Jello cakes and Jello objects to be used throughout the vault.
Because it's true, right? Gelatin probably lasts for 250 years in dried form.
Did you guys feel a lot of pressure to kind of get it right for the sort of like video game community, which is notoriously, sort of diabolical in how it reacts to a lot of things?
Yes.
Or was that kind of just not out of your mind?
It was certainly something that was in the back of our mind, although we felt a little bit like we could take some license with some of the stuff in terms of scale of things, like,
No, I felt like I had to really be true to the game.
there were a couple of things that we had to just sort of cobble together that weren't in the game, like the injection gun kind of thing that Wilzig shoots himself with, and the headgear that he puts on.
The trank guns in the vault were not part of the game at all. We came up with that. We sort of designed them a little bit. Well, there was like a trank machine gun that we designed to be similar to like another weapon from the game. But I think there was the idea that we were going to make some of our own things, but they would sort of fit in with the aesthetic of the game and
definitely we're
same
trying
kind of
to.
functionality as other things that existed there. We also, in talking with Howard and talking with Jonah, we would have to sort of pitch. At the beginning, we were given very short blocks of time to pitch as many ideas as possible. So we used to like line up 15 to 20 things and have like 10 to 15 minutes to sell somebody on that idea before we started making it. And
Wow.
we had gotten a lot of assets from Bethesda, digital assets to use, but all of their digital assets were, for design elements for a video game. So once we started to actually send them to our illustrators to figure out the files, we learned very quickly that a lot of them didn't work as a practical item.
It had to be re-rendered, like the Pip Boys and the got some of the guns and stuff.
Let's talk about the Pit Boys, because that's clearly a key aspect of the gameplay, is these devices people wear on their wrists. But the practicality of wearing them on their wrists, and not just in the vaults, but it goes throughout the show, and we leave the vaults as well. That's got to be a specific challenge that, to Gianni's point earlier, you got to get right if you're going to keep the game community on board.
Well, I think the Pip Boys for us, after the power armor was the first thing we tackled, just because it was going to take the most amount of time to actually make. So we started with that, and the next thing we really tackled was the Pip Boy, just because obviously, they had made toy Pip Boys. Bethesda had made them for the Pip Boys in the various games. We wanted ours to be different. And also the first thing that we learned was that it needed to be smaller than the ones that had already been made. So the scale immediately sort of dropped enough that it became challenging in that respect to get something in there with a screen that we could actually use and program and make our own screens based on it. So that was sort of the first challenge. And then the challenge of opening it and closing it and having it be able to be taken on and off and secured on somebody's wrist presented a challenge, which carried on throughout because they broke all the time.
Because they were basically all 3D printed parts
Yeah.
and recast 3D printed in hard rubber and stuff. We didn't have the the luxury of a lot of production time. So we had to make them in the sort of way that we make props for movies, which is not really an industrial process. It's more of a like a prototyping process. So we basically had about, I don't know, 25 workable ones that.
Yeah.
So it was like having 25 prototypes. And yeah, they used to break on us all
And
the
they
time.
would fall off.
We had all kinds of workarounds for how to keep them on people. And we had two different sizes, which is also different from the game. We had a sort of a large and medium size. And the medium was about as small as it could be and still hold the little iPhone, what were they? iPhone 3s or something that we were using? iPhone 5s that we were using, which was the smallest programmable, the sort of earliest iPhone that we could put our own stuff on, that we could, Bluetooth to.
So, because when we're looking at it, that's not CGI. You guys are putting the images on those
Yes.
Pit Boys.
In most of the cases, yeah. We had live images in the Pit Boys. There's some places where they had to burn it in, but yeah.
But in most cases, we tried to have a real screen on a real Pit Boy being worn when we could. Obviously, there are a lot of stunt sequences where we needed to have a rubber Pit Boy on the actors, and there's also just the sheer number of background that we had in the vault. We needed to have, a mass-produced sort of rubber Pit Boy that they could sort of bang into things and not really break them too easily. Although they seem to break them all anyway.
The hinges were, not that durable. Yeah. We were thinking about, like, instead of putting phones in some of them, like in the stunt ones, maybe putting some sort of light panel in them, but it didn't work out. But we did put little, like, just static images, printed images inside the fully rubber ones behind a little sort of clear rubber screen. So, if it flashed by, there would still be a little Pit Boy image in there, a little Vault Boy image, like doing something, walking.
Overall, I think we tried to include as much as we could for everything that was on the Pit Boy that was used in the game, the dials, the little nodule to open the vault and things like that. That was also another thing because we had to make certain ones where the cord that it could extend out a lot longer, so the person could actually take the nodule and move it far enough to be able to put it into the control panel. And a lot of the other ones didn't have that. So there were a couple different versions that we had. We had one that would eject at the top, so you could put a holotape holotape into the Pit Boy, which we used a bunch, and then we ended up adapting flashlights on them that came in later. There was sort of a way for the Pit Boy to be used to accommodate whatever was written in the script.
It's a sort of complicated enough looking device that we figured, you wouldn't notice from episode 1 and 2 that there wasn't a flashlight on it when we suddenly put one on in episode 4.
Right.
Johnny, you were following maybe a little closer. Did you notice that the flashlight appeared out of nowhere?
I mean, I was waiting, of course, for the flashlight, but the flashlight that you guys created for it, far more functional than the one that was originally in Fallout 3.
We needed to have one that the person, when it came up, where it is in the thing on the actual game is sort of like a little light in the front, but it would be very challenging to sort of lead the way down a hallway with the flashlight at that spot. And we sort of figured it would be better to have it so that someone could point their wrist out and have a flashlight there.
We did use real little, keychain flashlights. We built them into a little part of the hinge, I guess, that on the back of the wrist of the.
We made a little plate at the top, and then we had to sometimes tape like 6 of them together when they were off camera to make the light bright enough, because they were lighting scenes with them after a while because they sort of liked the way they looked, so they wanted like get a brighter flashlight in there. I'm like, well, you really can't fit a brighter flashlight, so we just taped a whole bunch together and stuck it on top.
And then in terms of projections, because similarly, of course, to the Pip Boy thing, the actual, I believe it's Vault 33, right, that Lucy, or sort of protagonist, comes from. Actually, in dialogue, there was the idea that the sort of main area would have an entire projection of the whole sort of Nebraskan countryside, I think is what it was. And then the actual cornfield that I guess sort of inspires everybody to kind of get to work. Was that also like an actual projector that they could look at in real time, or was that just totally VFX, Regina?
So the cornfield in Vault 33, so we had 2 of them. So in the stage, we did not have the projection on, but we did shoot in a volume where we did have the projection and where we did hold our wedding between Lucy and oh
The
gosh,
guy from Vault
Monty.
31.
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
Something with an M, right? It's like
Monty
Mason or
was his
Maxon
name.
or
He's from
Monty.
32,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah,
Monty.
but that's a
Monty.
whole, yeah, that's again, we're
But-
open to
but the
spoilers,
corn, but we had the corn in both places, and I can't even tell you. I think I had like 3,000 or more stalks of fake corn. I think I bought out every piece of corn that was in the United States, and I had to wait for it in China. But we had a lot of corn, and then we grew some real corn.
That was a kind of a Howard joke, right? I mean, it's corn and it's corny, and
Yeah.
we figured that that was their crops. So we did a lot of corn jokes. This was before that musical showed up on Broadway, Shucked. We were all like, it came out before our show. We were a little annoyed.
Yeah, they bought all the rest of the corn for their production.
Yeah, probably
lot
the
of
same
corn.
corn.
Well, when we're talking about the vaults, again, we start there, but it's again, spoiler, we get back and forth to the vaults over the course of the 8 episodes, and not all vaults are created the same. Regina, was there any specific rooms in the vault or aspects of it that you thought were the most fun as far as putting this together?
Well, I really loved Vault 33, our original vault. But it was fun when we had to do Vault. I think it was it Vault number 4, where they were doing the experiment with the fish. So everything in that vault had like a fish theme to it. We used fish wallpaper. We had a fish tank. That was the overseer that had the one eye, because all of their experiments kind of went a little bit wrong, and that's where the birthing of the fish woman babies came out. They were like little tadpoles. So that was fun. And then we had another, I think it was like Vault 34. That was where all the bad crops were, and it was kind of like desolate, and it was supposed to be, that's where I think the nursery was, with the man with the no leg in the rocking chair.
32, I think, right?
Yeah, 32. I got confused of which they all were, but they all kind of had a common theme throughout, but they were all a little bit different. Like each overseer for those different vaults, they all had the same setup in the overseer office and the same furniture, but the furniture was either in a different color, and we had a different theme going for each one of them.
I
But it was
remember
fun.
at one
I think
point
all of it was fun.
there was a really long discussion about how the vaults were set up in a triangular format, and there were 3 different vaults that were connected. And Jonah at one point was suggesting that we do the graphics on Vault 32 backwards, like the big 32 on the wall of on the door to the vault was supposed to be made backwards, so that we could flip the whole film so that it wouldn't be obvious that we were shooting in the same vault room. It would look like it was facing the other way or something. I think that sort of went by the wayside. I don't remember. Regina, did we ever do that?
No, that kind of went away.
We
I think
did
they
shoot.
tried and it didn't look right. It didn't, come on screen right. So
We
that
did
kind of
shoot some footage with people wearing the Pip-Boys on their other wrists and that sort of thing at one point, but then I think it just all got-
Costume was going to make Vault 32 suits that had the 32 backwards on the back of them. I don't know if they ever did that.
too much money.
And then when you get to Vault 31, I mean, this is again spoilers for sort of where the show kind of leads up to, but Vault 31 is the real first like departure of, I think, the sort of aesthetical style that you guys had crafted for the vault itself, where it's pretty barren. There's really like one hallway and then a big room and then a bunch of, I guess, cryo tubes or whatever you would call them, for where all of the original sort of vault tech people were residing in. Was that, I mean, by design, supposed to be a complete departure from everything else that we had seen before? Is it supposed to feel sort of alien and foreign in comparison, or?
It is. I mean, that was a small part of the set that they extended. But all the architectural details are the same.
Mm.
It's just the cryo tubes were a little bit different, like hanging in the air. But the architectural, like I said, the architectural pieces were still in the same vein as the vaults.
There were definitely some sets that were, well, I mean, every set was kind of reused in some way or another, or adapted. And that last set, we had this one big stage that we ended up turning into like coming out of this one vault door, intervault doors. And that was the one stage where there's a big open space that when you went through that door, it could be any of the vaults, basically. And we used that for that cryo tubes space.
The Vault 31, though, they purposely kept it very dark. It was basically the only person living there is robot on a Roomba.
Well, let's talk about that. Bud Askins survives. He's a brain on a Roomba. Like that's my memory of Vault 31. And I just can't imagine, I don't know, even how you guys are moving that around. Like, is the actor on set? Does he have some control over this Roomba that's playing his brain?
No, we were operating.
Yeah, it was remote controlled, and we actually put an iPhone in the front face plate of the robot and created a graphic for the sound waves to make it so when he spoke that would modulate. And the actor was off camera saying his lines, and we were controlling it with a remote control, moving it around.
It was a tough piece to operate because it actually held about 6 gallons of water, the dome that was upside down with the brain in it. And so that if you do the math, it's 8 pounds a gallon. So it was about 50 pounds of water sitting on top of this remote control car. I mean, granted, it was the biggest remote control car motor that we could find.
Well, it was the biggest one that we could find that would fit the profile of how big they wanted the base to be, because they wanted the base to be pretty small. And
they kept saying a Roomba. It's got to look like a Roomba.
Yeah,
so
so that limited the motor's capacity, but the brain was a human brain, so the dome had to be a certain size to accommodate that and not feel like it was just a brain without a spinal cord and this brain stem and all that. So it's sort of
it went a little slower than they were
they
hoping that it would go, was the upshot. And they were like, can you make it go any faster? Can it get down the hall any faster? And we're like, sorry, it's at top speed now. And if it crashes into the wall, it's going to be a big mess when all of that water goes on the floor.
So it's sort of, but I think it ultimately worked out really well in the end. It looked great. And it's sort of,
the idea,
Bud's
I don't know
character if came out in the movement of the Roomba.
The idea was that there was a broom that fell over like at some point 100 years before, and the Roomba couldn't get past it. Like, so it was trapped in a little corner and had been bouncing against this broomstick for like 100 years. And it takes, Norm coming in there to free him up so he can move. So then he thinks he's like all set, and he like is ready to inject Norm with some, nefarious potion. And it turns out he's just really slow, and Norm is like, just get away from me, and can walk away from. I thought that was pretty funny, that whole gag with the Bud at the end.
I suspect that people that haven't seen the show or played the games are going to think that we have been stuck in the vault for a similar period of time. I want to go deeper, and I want to take us outside. But again, I can't believe I'm saying this. Maybe we try to think about what our favorite things are on these other locations to try and dive into. Let's go outside. Earlier, Michael, you had mentioned the power armor as being a huge challenge that you guys took up front. Talk to me about the Brotherhood of Steel. I understand you shot that in Utah, and just how that came together. Whether you want to kick off with the power armor, some stories about that, or Regina, you want to talk about taking this military base and what you turned it into.
Let them talk about the power armor first.
We had Legacy, which is a big effects costume company in Los Angeles that does a lot of the work for Star Wars shows and so on. We had hired them to create the power armor that was practical, which was 2 sets of armor that was wearable and 1 piece that we called the clamshell that you could puppeteer to open, so the back would open, and
it was a static suit, but you could actually step into it when the panels were open, and it had the full built out interior mechanisms of the power armor in there. So you could step in it, you could put a helmet on top of it and try to get your head up into the hole in the helmet and sort of operate and be in there in a static suit. And we used it a number of times. I mean, I think
could also, when it was closed, it would be freestanding.
Yes.
I mean, it was able of just sort of standing up, and we did use it at the Brotherhood of Steel base a lot in various places where they're admiring the T-50 armor and stuff.
We also built one of the power armor cradles that we had at that base as well. But we basically started, Peter and I, we had only had 2 scripts at first, and maybe the 3rd one before we actually started working with Legacy. But we came up with a plan of basically what we knew the scenes had called out for and what the power armor needed to be able to do. Because when we started with the actual construction of it, once they started working on it, we knew that it wasn't going to be ready until sort of the end of May, early June. And we only had a couple of scripts at the time when they started, fabricating pieces and doing all that. So once it started going, it was very challenging to sort of change or make additions on the onset because they had already gone far enough into getting it ready in time to shoot. So
Yeah, there was like a month of computer rendering, as I recall, because we sent them models that we had gotten, 3D models that we had gotten from Bethesda. They were completely impractical in terms of the interior structure and in terms of the way they really
we also
were
had our
set up.
illustrator. We had two illustrators working with us, and this one guy, the guy Wes Louis, spent a lot of time animating the power armor and building it out so that it would be able to fit around an adult, human-sized person. And so there was a lot of work done that before it was delivered to them. But once it got there, they were building it, and it was sort of like, okay, this is where it's going to be. And we kept on having to make modifications to other things so that the power armor could work for all these different aspects of, like, we designed assault rifles for them to carry, but the assault rifles in the scale that they were supposed to be for the power armor were too difficult to carry. So then we modified them to make smaller ones, and we made plates that would go on the gloves of the power armor. So we would bolt the guns to the hands so they could actually hold them, because the hands weren't really able to articulate around the pistol grips of the guns without, being bolted. So there was a lot of work in conjunction with Legacy that we kept on doing throughout.
We should say that at the very beginning, Jonah sort of tasked us with seeing if it was at all practical to build the suits at all.
Yeah.
At one point, they were talking about maybe only having sort of a proxy suit, which is just a sort of rough shape that will sort of reserve the space so that it can be basically built by CGI after the fact. And Jonah really sort of was always pushing for a practical version of it. And, it was a big gamble that it would actually work when we physically built it, but it certainly paid off. I mean, it was so much better to actually have suits that we had an amazing stuntman that was a very lucky find. The guy who, Adam Shippey, who does almost all of the work inside the suit. He was really great at it from the get-go. I mean, I went out to Los Angeles to just make sure that conceptually we were all on the same page at Legacy, and Adam came out and got into the early version of the suit and like did a tumble with it and rolled around and jumped and ran, and it was, it sold it. And so then they finished that and they made another one and they made the clamshell, and
Yeah.
But to get back to the Brotherhood of Steel, we had those 3 suits, and we also had 3 that cosplay builders had built like in previous years that we bought. And we sort of tried to have them adapted so that they could be worn on camera, but we were never really planning on using them for anything but stand-ins. But when we went out to Utah, we ended up having to put people in all of them for the scene where they're, walking from the dirigible. I think they ended up not using all of those shots and actually just cloning the better ones.
We used them again at the battle scene at the end of the show. We had all of them working again. I mean, one thing I would say is we did have one that we bought early on from this guy, Sean Thorson, who he ended up building other props for us as well throughout. He built the Deathclaw skull at the end, and he built some other props. But we had it just so we can use it as a template for a scale and just to get a sense of looking at an object standing in front of us instead of just looking at items, pictures on a computer screen, to sort of understand the scale of what it would be with an actor standing next to it, what it would be in the vertebra, just to it helped to sort of just really set the scale for what other sets needed to be. It had to run through a vault hallway, so that we knew that the elevators in the vault and the thing needed to be a certain height. And there was a lot of things that sort of came out of having that first suit there.
How much of the vertibird was practical as well? Because it looks seamless.
No, we built part of the vertibird, the shell of it, I would say. So we had the whole interior built. We had a Sharpie welded it all together. I had to find all the seats and pulsar it all and have all the different foot gear. And so one of them was built, the rest of them was CGI. Is that what you're going to say, Peter?
It didn't have the
Didn't have the wings.
propellers or anything.
Yeah, it
But it
had-
had the whole cockpit, including the outside of it and all
Yeah.
of the windows and everything, the whole sort of cockpit. It's sort of like a blown up version of a like Vietnam era Huey, I guess.
We built the cockpit, the whole interior fuselage, and then the minigun and the gun turret and all of that was practical. And they built like the lower portion of the vertebra where they would climb onto.
Yeah, like the fuel tank step kind of
You know,
thing.
fuel tank steps. But and then after that, everything else, and they had it on a large gimbal. So when we shot it in the volume for certain scenes, the vertebra would be moving around as if it was flying. And when there was taking on gunfire, they had evasive moves, and you know, it was able to move around. So the people when there were actors inside of it, it felt like it was really flying, you know, around.
The most nausea-inducing 20 minutes of my life was spent like during camera tests inside that thing. Like I was standing in for the pilot at one point, and the whole thing was like rocking back and forth and zipping around and shaking up and down. And meanwhile, we were shooting this in the volumetric stage, which is basically a 360-degree video screen. Most people are familiar with it now from all the Star Wars shows and so on. But we had one built in New York. It was the first one in New York that we built for Fallout. And the vertibird, a lot of the interior of the work that we did inside of the vertibird was shot in that volume stage with real California landscape, you know, sort of coming over the hills and approaching the Los Feliz and in the desert and stuff. So that was projected on the background. So it really gave you a realistic sense that you were flying in the thing, like with all of this stuff moving around outside of it. It was
The thing about
crazy.
the volume is it's not only panels on the sides of the stage, the panels can move to be on the floor or on the ceiling. So when you're looking down out of the cockpit, out of the vertibird, you're seeing the ground below projected on that, you know, digitally projected as if you're flying above and not just what's around on the sides of you.
But the interior of the vertibird was great. I mean, the set tech department did an amazing job of finding vintage like helicopter seats and parts, and what they couldn't find they built, and it really was an amazing little set.
Yeah, I would say we found probably like 90% of it, but it was a little crazy trying to find it all. We actually used, I think, car seats for the pilot seats.
Like race car seats.
Yeah, race car seats.
And then the moment when you drop Maximus and Titus off of the vertibird, how did you guys actually achieve something like that practically?
Well, we built practically that belaying sort of
A trapeze, right?
that we had welded. We set that up so that it would be a visual effects element, and then we did do a drop. Stunts did a drop with the actor in the power armor and you know, Maximus to him and dropping down on a line. We did that, and then we did it against blue screen. We did it a couple different ways. But
That little trapeze thing was complicated, and it was one of the things that we had to invent that wasn't in the game. Because in the game, basically the power armor suit seems to be capable of falling from a mile up in the air without anybody inside getting damaged, which, you know, sort of counter to the laws of physics, I guess. But so we sort of figured out that there would be a drop rig of some sort, and we made this idea that it was a thing with two hooks facing into the thing, and that the pauldron rings on the shoulders of the power armor, he could just sort of walk into it and it would clip him in, and then he could just jump out and it would lower him down.
And the Squire uniform had leather suspender straps with different clipping points on it, so that he would be able to clip onto the power armor and drop down with it.
I saw an interview with Aaron where he said he wasn't sure what the hell those D-rings on the front of it were until we got to the scene where he's like lifted up and clamped onto the power armor's front and dropped down like, you know, a baby, you know, being held on. At which point he bashes his face for the fifth of, you know, 100 times that his face gets bashed in on the armor. It was pretty good.
Yeah, but it was one of those things, you know, and also just in general, in the early stages, there was a lot of communication that had to happen between our production team in New York, the legacy production team, and Peter and I were sort of the conduit of, weekly meetings and updates and sort of making sure that everybody was on the right page and making sure that the progress was happening. And we sort of were really, because we just sort of ended up being the ones who were able to move all that forward with legacy.
We talk about these major set pieces of the armor, but one of the things I love about the show is then you can't sleep on the small stuff either, because before we walk away from the Brotherhood of Steel, it struck me there's a scene where they're playing brick basketball. Like where they're like now, just it's such a perfect little moment where they're throwing bricks into a basketball hoop. And that's kind of like, so where someone says, we're going to throw bricks. Like, talk to me about a little scene
I
like
don't know. I have to be honest. I don't know where the bricks came from, but when I was out in Utah, I mean, we shot out in Wendover at Wendover Air Force Base, and it was a unbelievable backdrop. We shot the schoolroom, the classroom in one of the hangars, and we used the old barracks from the World War II barracks as the Brotherhood of Steel barracks. I had an unbelievable shopper out there. His name was Roger, and he took it upon himself. He found such great set dressing out there, and he knew where to go. He was a local, and he was a theater guy, and he and another one of his assistants built. He was like, don't worry about it. I found all this great equipment. He took it upon himself to build that whole kind of like the basketball court with the metal net and everything. And he did like the whole training, oh gosh, what do you call that when they when you run across a
obstacle course.
Like the obstacle course.
Yeah, like an obstacle course kind of training grounds and stuff like that. So he did all of that. He built the flagpoles for me out of wood and with the rope, and so that was all Roger. I can't take any credit for that at all.
We brought the weights.
Yeah, the
We made
dumbbells,
weights out of
barbells.
paint cans, that were supposedly filled with cement, and we stuck them on or no, they were like giant tomato cans or
Yeah,
something.
they're big soup. Then also as a last minute thing, we sort of just used some of those cans and made the sensors for the clerics.
Yeah.
With the smoke, they would be blessing everybody with their brushes. We made those got
sash chain.
Yeah,
like a tripod of sash chain with tin cans with holes punched in them and burning smoke. And yeah, that worked a lot. And we used basting brushes for the sort of ceremonial anointing brushes that they keep using, from the sort of like the Eastern Orthodox anointing brushes.
some of them were like sign painting brushes and other things like that. No, but there was a lot of great things. The backdrop was amazing. All those little bunkers and the bomb testing bunkers out in the fields, out in the hills over there that we shot at, where they were moving around artillery shells, wheelbarrows and things like that. Like, just there was a great backdrop at that location.
And the place was amazing looking.
There's also like a actual bomb crater from a test that happened that was very close to where we were filming the beheading scene of Wilzig out there.
Yeah.
Right. We provided the latrines, as I recall, that was Regina's department and our department working together to find those graduated tires that were piled up, and then the toilet seat bolted into the top.
Yeah.
That was a big deal about him breaking the toilet seat because the effects department didn't manage to get it to break at the right time, so we had to keep going back.
And we talk about shooting some of those scenes, maybe not directly on the base. As I understand it, a lot of the desert stuff, though, you went and shot in Namibia.
Yes.
That was crazy. Yeah.
I mean, the first challenge was making the list of what to bring, because there were a lot of quote unquote unwritten scenes that they had planned on shooting out there. They were just like, there's going to be a scene with this person, and we don't necessarily know what it's going to be yet. So basically went through and we brought everything that we thought was possible. And one thing that we just brought on a whim, because we didn't make the Wilzig heads. They were made by our special effects makeup department, but they had made us a head that was a stunt head that we had used at some points, and we decided to bring it with us to Namibia just to have it, because we thought it would be sort of good to have. and it ended up being like
The main prop that we used.
there were two units going, and everybody kept on fighting over the head who needed it for their unit.
Yeah, I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't had it. Total disaster. The producers came to us, they're like, we realized that we didn't tell you that you had to bring the head, so we certainly didn't expect you to bring it, and now what can we do? Do we have to go have somebody to counter it from New York or
No, we
whatever?
don't.
And we're like, well, we have it, sorry.
We packed a bunch of, crates of everything, and we brought it all to the airport, flew there, and then on the way back, I remember we were flying back from Johannesburg Peter and I were on different flights, and I'm at the Johannesburg airport getting ready to go on my flight, and they're like, all the cargo is sitting downstairs at the airport. And I had to run down there and then grab and get all that stuff packed up again and brought back on our flight because they were going through everything, checking everything that never went through customs again.
We were very nervous that stuff would get held up in South Africa or in Namibia or something. We had a big list of like do's and don'ts that we had to do when we were making our carnet for Namibia. And like we were sending a ton of stuff that just looked like weapons, like things that looked like machine guns.
The iPhones. The only thing they wanted were the iPhones. The iPhones got held up and then they brought them to the hotel later. There was one thing that we got stopped in customs with was like 8 iPhone 5s that we
For the
had.
Pit Boys, yeah.
What about deviled eggs? Did you send deviled eggs from the US or did you build those local in Namibia? I mean,
They were made out of marzipan in South Africa and driven to our local crew, our local prop guys were from Cape Town, and they had somebody make them there, and they drove them from Cape Town to Namibia.
They had a sculptor who made the initial rad roach as well,
Yes.
which was handy that we didn't have to ship that from because it was pretty big. The sculptor that they found did a really good job of it. It didn't actually move or do anything, but we used it a lot, and then it was the basis for all of the other rad roaches throughout the show.
And how many days of filming in Namibia? Like in all the desert stuff, what was the time frame on that?
I think it was 5 days, 4 days, or
Oh,
5
that's all.
days.
Yeah, we were
It
there
was
for maybe 8 days total with travel. Like I remember flying there, scouting in the morning and shooting our first scene in the afternoon.
It was quite a trek. I mean, it takes
2 days.
from New York to Joburg is like a 17 or 18 hours. It's really far south. And then we had to stay overnight in Johannesburg, and we all got on a charter flight from Johannesburg up to Namibia, which was like a 3-hour flight. I mean, it wasn't close. So it was like a day and a half to travel there. And we were there for 5 days of shooting, and then we did the same thing on the way back. A little more relaxed on the way back, but not much. It was a real journey.
After we landed from Namibia, I think we had like 4 days, 5 days before we went to Utah. So it was really like a quick turnaround.
And a lot of the stuff that we had in Namibia had to go to Utah also.
Yeah.
So like including all of the power armor, it had all gone to Namibia with the legacy guys, and it's all going to go back, and including, and plus the extra stuff, cosplay suits and the cradle. And
We had packed both our prop trailers to leave for Utah when we were leaving for Namibia. So they were able to drive those there. We flew out, came back, and it was all sort of there.
it worked out.
Regina, from your perspective with production design and set decoration, they're only shooting 5 days in Namibia, but again, that's going to have your hands all over it as well. How do you manage that?
Well, I didn't have to go to Namibia. They hired a really great crew out there that Howard was comfortable with. And like Michael just said, they went right to Utah like a couple days later. So I was in Utah prepping for 2 weeks before they even came. So I was out there. Howard was down in South Africa, Namibia, and that's how it worked out. I think they did a great job. It looks great, Namibia, that whole part. I mean, I wish I would have been able to go, but there was no possible way that I could have.
Utah was a massive undertaking. Namibia was a lot of travel, but a fair amount of what we shot was already pre-existing in this demolished mining town that existed there.
The sand farmer's house exterior was a pretty big dress, I guess.
Yeah.
And the inside of the house where the families poisoned themselves was a pretty big dress.
And the hospital was
The little hospital room.
Yeah.
Mostly that hospital was just I guess the place was a diamond mine company town in like 1890 or something that had been built by the miners who set it up. And it's been let to turn into a ghost town sort of on purpose. And a lot of the buildings are actually full of sand that's blown in there over the course of the years.
There were actually two locations. There was the first town, the one town was a town that was part of a tourist destination for, I mean, it was a German mining town, so there's a lot of German and Dutch tourists that went there, and there was a gift shop and all this stuff. But then there was another area that was along the water that we had to get permission from the mining department to go to. We had passes, we went in every day, and that was like a 30-minute drive on this dusty road to get to the ocean. And that was a demolished sort of maybe World War One mining facility that was not open to the public.
The story that I heard was that it was a pre-World War One diamond mine for industrial diamonds that had, at the end of World War One, had been demolished by the German army that was working the mine because they didn't want it to fall into enemy hands and they were losing the war and everything. So they basically dynamited all of the buildings there. And it's so dry there that instead of rusting away, like, you know, over 100 years, like most steel-based buildings would, it's just turned into this like amazing, weird, twisted structures of black iron and chunks of concrete that you see in the show. That's this sort of post-apocalyptic landscape. And I mean, they used the hell out of that location.
Oh, totally.
We were questioning like the practicability of going there and staying for 5 days and like what is the point? But when you see the show, it's amazing. I mean, the show is made by those shots, I think. Like Lucy wandering in the desert and you know, those weird structures of buildings, and when they come out of the vault at the end of episode 6, I guess, or 7.
Well, in the first episode, when she first exited the vault for the first time, she exited into Namibia, and they brought all this dressing in pieces in to make it look like it was Santa Monica Pier.
Right.
Now we talk about these sets though, but you didn't film Philly. That you shot stateside somewhere, mostly on stage, or do you guys have a location for that?
The town was filmed in 2 locations. There was a backlot stage set at the stages. There was a container lot at Steiner that the town was built in. And then there was a junkyard in South Jersey that the
Entryway. Yeah, so
Atco, New Jersey. Yeah.
So it was Atco, New Jersey, in a junkyard, Wade's junkyard, but that's like the entryway to Philly. But when she comes out of the cockpit shell, like the airplane, and looks out, that whole set we built on the back lot in Steiner Studios.
They've sort of carved out a corner of the parking lot at Steiner and stacked up like 3 or 4 high shipping containers around a big, maybe 150, 250 yard across open area. So we actually used the shipping containers as part of the set and sort of built off of them, brought in airplane parts and stuff. And I mean, that was really
major undertaking. Yeah.
An amazing accomplishment by set deck and construction and everything.
Well, and you just get to go nuts on this, right?
We went nuts on it.
Easter eggs, and you get to imagine the future, and just, yeah, I mean, every frame of that sequence when they're in the town feels like full of your work, all of your work.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give props to Howard Cummings. I mean, he's the one that designed that and had it in his mind and knew exactly where it would go in the lot and how it would all be drawn out and conceived with Mod Junes. And then we had like the auto mechanic shop, and then we had the dentist. I mean, it was all the way he planned it. It was kind of like a 360 around. And the art directors that ended up designing it with all of the kind of scrap metal and all the found parts that I found with like doors and airplane parts and just any kind of scrap that we could find. And we actually we had these armatures that were welded together. They were just huge. I don't even know. They were probably like 10 foot long by 6 foot tall. And we would just throw, we would have garbage like welded onto that. So the perimeter of the whole set was just full of garbage that was mounted onto these big screens. I mean, we kind of went wild in that place, but it was a great set. And like they said, between the art department, construction, scenics, set dressing, I mean, props. I mean, it was a team effort, but it all stemmed from like Howard and what he was thinking the whole time. And it came out beautifully.
We were sort of concentrating in the prop department on the sort of what happened in the middle there with we did all those vending, like sort of carts that were like guys selling two-headed lizards on a stick and stuff like that.
Can I ask you where the tomatoes came from? Was that scripted, or did you just put those in there? I thought that when I was watching, that was so funny.
I went to the Chinese grocery store and bought a whole bunch of weird looking dried mushrooms and dried plums and things like that. And originally that basket was full of like some kind of really umabashi plums or something. But then on the day that we were shooting it, I think Walton decided that it would be fun if he actually took something out of there and ate it. And so we added cherries, I think it was at first, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but then the pits were too hard to deal with. So we put cherry tomatoes in too. And I think that there's a thing in the game where you can grow tomatoes. So that was a little bit of a call out to the game that there were tomatoes in there. Yeah, but they just came from the grocery store down the block.
In this scene also is the first time that you actually see like bottle caps and legitimate usage. Was it always by design that he just like pulls them out at the end and then like tosses them for the tomatoes, or was that just like kind of something spur of the moment?
No, we had bottle caps in that scene. There was an earlier scene where somebody gets mugged or someone is beat up by a guy for stealing bottle caps earlier, and then he had bottle caps that we threw in the air for the tomatoes at the end. That was something that we sort of came up with as we were there shooting.
Are they actual bottle caps that you guys used, or okay?
Yeah, we made bottle caps, but we printed Nuka-Cola on the tops of bottle caps because we had Nuka-Cola bottles that we could fill and cap so that they could be opened up and drank. So we had bottle caps, Nuka-Cola bottles made, and all of the,
Not that easy to make glass bottles. None of them were glass because
glass.
You'd think you could just call up a bottle company and say, can we make a bottle with fins on it? But no, you need to order like 1 million of them or something if you really. So we had, a prop house made them out of plastic, basically.
Yeah, that was actually somebody we found who was someone on Etsy who had made them for, as a fall-on fan that was making them. He made them completely sealed with like with resin inside to be the colored liquid. And we called him up and we started talking to him. We asked if he could make them fillable, and he said he could. So he said, let's see if you can do it. And he made us a couple and they look great. So we ordered another 24. Then we ended up ordering more.
We had a bunch, yeah. They were very popular. Jonah used to like bring me a Nuka bottle and, he's doing a little promo bit or something.
They were popular. All the products sort of became popular items to have floating around.
Can I ask you about the box of legs?
Oh, the
Jim Slim?
Yeah, it's the most outrageous. Like one of the funniest visual jokes I had seen was that box of legs that she just kind of has offhand under the defibrillator, but also not under the defibrillator.
It was an idea that Jonah had that, it should be this weird thing that they have at Ma June's because there's been a war. It's a call out to the Shady Sands kind of situation, I think. And it was one of the writers who said it should have something to do with, some patriotic motto on the outside of it. And I like to take credit for it being my idea to make it look like a garbage disposal. But Jonah was the one who said it should do all these things, like it should be a stump grinder and grind off the bottom of his leg, and it should then you should be able to put a foot on the bottom of it. I would give Jonah a lot of credit for the idea for that, which is totally not from the game, but it came out amazingly. We had it built out at a prop house in LA, and we had funny ideas about it. Like when you wound it up, it was supposed to play the Mr. Softy theme when it was grinding the stump off. I don't think they actually ended up doing that in the show. That was our original idea.
Johnny, tell me other locations from the games that you were happy to see in this series.
Oh, Gosh, well, there was a call out actually even in Philly with the Atomic Motel. There's a bunch of little signs and Easter eggs that you guys littered all throughout. I also think I caught a Wasteland survival guide like sitting on the
Yes.
desk, which was totally cool.
There was a Wasteland Survival Guide. There was also the Junktown Jerky Vendor magazine
Yes.
throughout.
And Grognak the Barbarian was also somewhere else in the series
Mhm.
too. But I was looking out for everything I possibly could. So that was super cool.
We had Grognak comics and Grognak video game, I think we had, right?
And then Regina, you had those magazines that were made that we had at the Brotherhood base that were the technology magazines.
Yep. Graphics. Yeah. Holly did all of those for
Yeah.
us out of the game. So they were all really great.
Yeah, so many good ones.
Definitely a big collaborative effort with all the within all the set deck, props, graphics, art departments sort of coming, the art directors and Howard coming together to put all the pieces together to make it.
It was a pretty amazing crew,
Yeah.
And everybody, the synergy was great. I mean, better than I think on any other show I've ever done, where everybody seemed to be working towards the same ultimate goal, and everybody had the idea of the show pretty well fixed in their mind. And a lot of the time we're working at cross purposes with construction or whatever. We have to do this first, and then you can do that, but we have to do that first because otherwise it won't make any sense and stuff. But in this case, it was really well art directed and really well designed, and it all seemed to fall together much more smoothly than on a lot of jobs I've done.
Also, a lot of great, research was done with Nara and our research department. A lot of information was available, and if anything needed to be looked up or there was any question, she would immediately come back with some research, some images, and so there was always a great resource of things to pull from.
Having 30 years of lore, of game lore, made things a lot easier than if we had to start over from scratch on everything.
Well, on that game lore, Johnny, you started to ask about Super Duper Mart.
Yeah.
Well, we shot that out in Staten Island in an empty A&P, or maybe the ShopRite, but it was, and I remember walking in and going, "Are you kidding me?" It was just a big, empty, huge supermarket.
Huge.
And it was huge, and I was just like, "How am I supposed to dress this whole place?" But it ended up not being as scary as it looked at first. Everything was set up really nicely. Like we had the row of old refrigerators that I had to find to put all the prisoners in, or the people that
The feral ghouls.
the feral ghouls, and ones that they were harvesting their organs from. We had another area where it was where Snip Snip had his little operating room. We had the area in the center amongst like some of the supermarket shelving that the two druggies hung out at, which reminded me of Wayne's World kind of land. And then in the back we had our really like dark and dirty operating room, which I don't think we ever saw back there.
We shot the back there for a bit in that back room. It was challenging because
when she defibrillates Snip Snip, that's in that
it's
room.
in that back room.
Was it back there?
I mean, the problem was that there was a camera dolly with the camera on a crane, and then there was another camera dolly with Snip Snip on a crane, and that's how he was operated. We made the ball, and it sat on a mounting plate of a dolly crane arm. So there was a dolly grip that was moving Snip Snip around up and down, left and right, and then a couple of us were puppeteering the arms that were attached but held with metal poles so that we could move the hands around. So the footprint of that took up a lot of space to sort of be moving him around, moving the camera around, and filming the scenes. It became but it worked out. I mean, we had his hands attached to a gurney, and we were pushing the gurney from below the gurney, and they were pushing the gurney. So there's a lot of visual effects, props, and our legacy team puppeteering Snip Snip with the grip department, moving him around.
Yeah, we brought in sand for the outside. I mean, we had a pretty long prep out there, which was good to have.
Well documented on Instagram by people taking pictures over the wall.
That was the only place we had infiltration. Somebody came in like after we had finished shooting and stole a bunch of
they stole all our bottles,
posters
like
and
all
stuff.
all the posters off the walls, all the little the rad
medications and
Yeah, all
stuff.
the
Yeah, with
medications,
Rad-X
Epi,
and
Rad-X, they stole like everything.
The one infiltration we had, which was not our fault, was we were shooting the scene with the Yao Guai at the cave. And it was the same. We were supposed to do a scene there that we never had time to shoot where Maximus got into the power armor. So the clamshell power armor arrives at the base camp, which was like some SUNY campus, giant parking lot. And the two guys from Legacy were like building the power armor suits in this parking lot because there was nowhere else to build it. And it ended up being filmed by people at the college campus when they were putting together this power armor suit in the parking lot. And then it had to travel back of a stake bed truck to the set with a tarp over it. So there was like a whole video.
Amazon security was
Yeah.
like they were flipping their lid. They were like, can you guys put up a tent over that right this second?
A lot of people taking pictures and
A lot of pictures,
online.
yes.
It was yeah.
But we figured it was probably good. You know, any publicity is good publicity.
Well,
We
it
didn't want
wasn't-
anything too
It wasn't
important getting
seen
out.
that
But
way at the time by certain people. Not very happy with it.
I think it was building buzz, building buzz for the show. So
The attention to detail on this show just invites a conversation that could go on much longer than this one already has. To finish up, tell me if there are favorite scenes or moments that we haven't covered.
Peter, I think you and Michael should talk about the radio
the radio station, that
radio
was that.
station.
Oh my
You all
God.
came up, you had to come up with I remember you had to come up with all those different kind of
The traps.
all the
Howard
different
tasked
traps. You
us.
guys were writing them on like drawing them on like napkins for that was all your idea.
It
Oh
was
my God.
that was pretty funny. Howard, like, I mean, he had sort of designed himself out, and he's like, can you just help me come up with some ridiculously idiotic booby traps that we can put there? So yeah, we did a bunch of thumbnail sketches of things like, oh, there's a big net filled with giant rocks and it's just poised over the top of you, and you sort of walk over it and trip on a trip line, and all of these rocks just fall down on you. Or you walk between two giant telephone poles that are hanging from a wire, and when you trip the tripwire, they swing together and bash your head. And
Or the crossbow in the trunk of the car.
yeah, the
Yeah.
trunk of the car that pops open and shoots him. That was the only part that was scripted.
Yeah, but it was not. I mean, it had to be developed.
It was fun.
It was a
A
busy
fun
day.
thing to.
I mean, the challenge of a lot of these scenes where we spent a lot of time at some locations, but like some locations, like for instance, the Red Rocket, we shot that in one day, and I believe it was snowing the day that we shot there.
Yep.
Like a spring, late or like a late
Little
February,
flurry,
early
yeah.
March snowstorm that hit. So it was like very challenging to accomplish that day. But also at some point we were doing 2 units at once. So that was being shot simultaneously with like another big scene going on somewhere else.
Like the deer and the gulper or something like
Yeah.
that at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the gulper had to play at like 4 different locations. They kept on reshooting or never finishing it. So we shot it at this first location in the summer. When we first started filming, it was like 100 degrees. We were at some reservoir quarry. I guess I forget exactly where we're in upstate New York, where we shot that and the dunking scene on that dunking dock. And then we didn't finish that, so we went and shot the gulper in our parking lot of the stage. And we brought the bus that we brought over there. We like
Yeah, we had to
recreated that
build a
area.
whole set of
Yeah.
that matched the location that we were at, and we did the part where they pull
Thaddeus out of the
Thaddeus
gulper.
out of the gulper's mouth and pull him inside out and stuff. That we did all that in the parking lot after we had finished shooting the rest of the show.
Yeah.
That was like the last thing we did, right?
That and I think we actually finished in Philly with an explosion. That was like the finishing of the show. But we definitely shot that fight over a long time. And also, Regina and Howard, they did a great job turning Ma June's into the barbecue shack for that episode, that scene with the ghoul.
The
when he gets
sheriff,
caught
the
by
president,
sheriff,
or
and he sews his finger back on. That whole thing was the backside of
Of
Approach was the backside of Ma June's.
and then Ma June's again became like the
and then we flipped it over, for Brotherhood
Yeah.
of Steel.
Yeah.
Brotherhood of Steel base.
Yeah, but that day was like a torrential downpour for that whole day of filming that barbecue scene. and we were inside Ma June's, and it was
Speaking.
water was coming through the roof. So heavy rain. It was like, it was, very challenging day.
I'm going to do another episode just with your first AD and that team to kind of figure out how they even put all this together with all the nutty stories you guys are telling.
A lot of ADs.
It was a long shoot. I feel like we were on that for at least a year. I don't know. It was a
We
long
were.
time.
It was a long
We
time.
were. We started basically in January and we didn't finish until like the next spring or something ridiculous like that.
Favorite props we haven't dug into?
My personal favorite was the sort of genesis of the Squire bag. That was one of the first things we figured out. And like
How big it was.
it said, it should be funny that he's carrying this huge. So we like basically drew it on a piece of paper, and everybody's like, "No, it can't be that big. That's ridiculous." And so we built it. It was like 3 feet across the top and 6 feet high, and we showed it to Jonah, and he's like, "This is the most hilarious thing I ever saw." And he started running around with it on his back. He's like, "We have to use this."
And what did you fill with balloons? I had no idea how that was even physically possible, much less
It was just like a big duffel bag. It wasn't really
It had
that
some
heavy.
metal rings inside to keep the shape, although they did get very
They got beat
damaged
up.
throughout.
Yeah,
And we have to have them refixed. We had a lot of different fabricators. At one point, we had like 100 things fabricating on the job, and we had a bunch of different people doing them. But everything sort of,
one thing that we got to design or sort of help Jonah design the weapons that the ghoul carried, his shotgun pistol and his rifle and stuff. And there was
and
a
the
lot
bullets,
of
the different
back
rounds
and the
of
bullets.
ammunition.
And I figured that we probably fabricated over 200 different props over the course of the show, which is a lot for any show when you have to start from scratch into it.
And we worked with costumes. We made all the little biometric parts for the vault suits, and we made the body armor that Lucy wore, and we just sort of did a lot.
We never said no. They said, "Can you help us with this?" We said, "Yeah, we'll fit it in somehow." We got a lot of work done.
Yeah.
I want to shout out specifically the junk jet, because one of my all-time favorites, and it just pops up right at the end of episode 1, and they don't even really comment about what it is and why it's shooting people with baby arms. I was like,
we made it, and we never knew that scene was not initially in that first script, so we didn't really make a junk jet that was practical to. First we made it out of foam because the original scale was way too big for somebody to actually hold. So then we made the other one to be hanging on the wall in Ma June's, and then it got written into the scene. So when we got it, we gave it to the actor who was carrying it, and he dropped it a couple of times when we were filming that scene, but it survived.
Fortunate that it had to be made light enough to hang on the wall. It was hollow, and the little hatch that you would actually load the garbage in was an actual hatch. So we were able to put, we drilled out the barrel, as I recall, so that we could have some smoke or light or something come out of the front.
It was fun though. We got it today. And then we made all those we made these plates with the parts that would screw onto the plates so you can have the baby leg.
Like
sticking out
little
of
toy
somebody's
boats
chest
that were
all
cut
day.
off in half, and baby legs that had little plates that you could, stick onto an actor with spirit gum or whatever. That was a great prop. But I mean, if you look at the junk jet that we made and you look at the junk jet in the game, I would say it's half the size.
Yeah.
I mean, that junk jet in the game is like something.
yeah.
We watched a YouTube video of somebody who played his entire way through Fallout 4 using only the junk jet. That was his only. He managed to do it in like 14 hours or something like that. Junk jet's very popular.
The show is very popular. Amazon's already greenlit a season 2. You guys going back for that?
Don't know yet.
Don't know.
No comment. We'll see.
The series sets up, certainly it ends knowing there's a good chance there's going to be a season 2. But was there a sense on set that, we're doing something that has got some legs?
I think so. I think that as we were making it, we knew that it was going to be something special and something different. And definitely we were able to see, parts of it as it was going on. And we watched little edited parts of it. We knew that we were making something really different, unique, special, and, very grand scale.
The lore is so vast, it was obvious to us that the writers that there's a lot more material out there.
Yeah.
Hopefully it can be in the same vein. I mean, the sort of, does it get too serious when they go to the enclave or whatever, or can it stay sort of jocular in tone and still have the fun vault, retro, futurist, and the flashbacks too, which I thought were absolutely terrific. All of the
Add a whole other layer to the universe to be in the
yeah, I mean,
apocalyptic
hopefully there's
world.
more of that in season 2, and there's more of like the story of Cooper Howard and his fall from grace and all that stuff. But yeah. But season 2, it seems, is going to be shot in Los Angeles, maybe at Melody Ranch where they shot Westworld. So whether that lets us New York guys out or not is yet to be seen. So,
well, whether you guys are involved with season 2 or not, I think there's a whole another episode of podcast we could have just done on this season 1. Listeners, you let us know you want to hear more of this. We'll revisit this, but this was a lot of fun. On that note, I think we'll call it a wrap. Great having everybody.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
It
you
was
guys
really
so much.
fun.
It was great being here.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, below the line, one word, .biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all of our social media, so check it out. What are you guys working on now? Where next are we going to see your work?
Regina and I are working together right now on this Bob Dylan biopic that is shooting here in New York, or New Jersey, I should say.
Yep.
I worked with them for a little while, but I'm starting tomorrow on Gilded Age season 3. We skipped season 2 because we were doing Fallout, but after the strike and everything, I thought maybe it would be good to latch on to a good long job. So I'm going to go back and do Gilded Age without Michael this time. I don't know how I'll do without Michael there. I really did all the work, but
You couldn't get enough of all the tea and finger sandwiches.
yeah, and letter writing scenes and stuff. I'm really looking forward to it. But no, I am. It's a fun show to work on.
Good luck with those projects. Gianni, remind people where they can catch the Bad Movies podcast.
Oh, yeah, it's on all podcasting platforms. So you can catch my voice. Skid's on there on an episode. It's a lot of fun. I also have another podcast that I'm doing with a buddy called Morphin Buddy, where we read all of the Animorphs books. So if that sounds interesting to any very niche millennial nerd out there, then come on over. It's a lot of fun.
Gianni, when we do a podcast about the movie adaptation, I'll definitely have you back. In the meantime, my closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.